A note to listeners, American Hustlers was created from in-depth research and reporting, public records, and the opinions of participants. The views expressed do not reflect those of Frequency Machine, its affiliates, licensees, or employees. In some cases, names were changed to protect the privacy of those involved, and all subjects are presumed innocent until proven guilty. This episode also includes some violent and sexually explicit content that may be triggering to some. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Previously on American Hustlers.
Maybe this is naive, but if Danny was this young guy who was victimized, right, by this man.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that he could then turn around and victimize Tyson so ruthlessly.
To understand how Danny Garcia and Kosal Narula managed to pull off a rash of cons that ultimately led to murder, my partner Julie knew we needed to try and understand who they were. Julie went down the Danny Garcia rabbit hole and found he was the definition of complicated. First, he'd presented himself as a sexual assault victim of self-made millionaire Thomas White.
That's a horrible thing to be a victim of. I mean, your heart breaks.
Who bravely took on his alleged abuser in court and won $1 million settlement. But then he stole Tyson's identity and drained his bank account, which left Tyson wondering,
Oh wait, Thomas White thing, that was probably also a con.
Thomas White's life was high profile enough that People magazine wrote an article about Danny's case. On the heels of that article, he was approached by a perfect stranger.
And he says, in his little fake British accent, well, don't I know you? And I said, no, I don't think so.
The stranger was Kosal Narula, a 20-something from Nepal. That meeting on an escalator in San Francisco formed a lethal connection.
They're very damaged people, and what got them damaged, I don't know.
At this point, Julie and I don't know either, but that's what we want to try and find out. Hi.
Hi.
So I did a little digging online.
Are we talking now about this?
Yeah, we're talking. My partner Julie and I have been tasked with uncovering the story of two prolific con men, Danny Garcia and Kosal Narula, who escalated from conning countless victims to murdering one. So far, thanks to victim-turned-armchair detective Tyson Wrench and Dennis, a member of their crew, we knew a lot about Danny Garcia. But at this point, all we knew about Kosal Narula is that he was running in the same San Francisco circles as Danny and Tyson. But we had no idea how on earth he ended up there. And that's what we wanted to find out. So we started with the one story Kosal seemed to tell anybody who would listen. I'm looking into the Kosal Narula is Nepalese royalty and his family was massacred story that we've been hearing.
Yeah, which is like one of the craziest stories I've heard, for sure.
It's nuts. And it is true.
The massacre is true.
Yes. It happened on the night of June 1st, 2001. The entire royal family was at the palace for a family dinner. They were gathered, I think, at the dinner table? They didn't actually say that. They could have been gathered anywhere. Now I'm just making stuff up. Okay, wait. Actually, it was the palace's billiards room. See, earlier in the evening, Crown Prince Dipendra had been shooting pool. And according to witnesses, he was throwing back a lot of whiskey. By around 8:20, he's pretty wasted. So some of his aides get him up to his room, I'm guessing to sleep it off, and meanwhile, the rest of the royal family is still downstairs hanging out. So apparently he wanted to marry some girl, and the royal fam was like not having it. I don't know if she didn't meet standards, but he was pissed. Around 8:39, he apparently drunk dials his girlfriend and tells her, I am now about to sleep. Good night. We'll talk tomorrow. Then he did the exact opposite. He threw on army fatigues, grabbed some guns, at least 3, and headed downstairs.
Oh my gosh.
He came in, guns blazing, killed 9 members of the family, including both his parents.
It's crazy.
Totally. And he turned the gun on himself, but here's the kicker. He didn't actually kill himself completely. He put himself into a coma, and while he was in a coma, he became king.
Oh my God.
I know. He was, I guess, the survivor and the next in line, but I was like, really? The guy that just annihilated the king and queen, his siblings, and some other people that were gathered for the dinner, you're just gonna put a crown on his head and call him king? But they did. But then 3 days later, he died. So he's dead. As if the details were not already nuts enough, post-massacre, there were actually riots in the streets, fueled by Nepalese citizens who had mad love for the prince and felt there was no way he could have been responsible. But an investigation and eyewitness accounts determined the prince did it, no question. When the prince killed most of the royal family, he also eventually killed the monarchy. By 2008, it was completely abolished.
Wow.
Right? So that's what I learned. So that is true. There was a family massacre. But was it Kosal's family? That's the question. A question I had no idea how to answer. I'm Kim Kantner, and I'm about to learn more about Nepal than I ever imagined possible. This is American Hustlers, presented by True Crime News. As far as I can tell, Kosal Narula would have been around 20 years old at the time of the massacre. A Google search served up some quick info. The name Narula was nowhere on the Nepalese royal family tree. Was Kosal extended family? A third cousin once removed? I don't know. But this was his story, and he was sticking to it. Even to Danny. Remember their meet cute on the hotel escalator? Julie told you about it in the last episode. Well, Kosal invited Danny out for drinks.
Kosal tells you how he's the exiled prince of Nepal and that his family had been massacred.
Danny was skeptical.
So, I kind of sized him up. I looked him up and down, and he doesn't exactly look like a prince. So I figured this guy's a little off his rocker. Didn't give him the time of day, got up, thanked him for the drink, and left.
At the time of this call in 2012, Danny Garcia was in prison. Yep, you heard me. Prison. I promise we're going to get to that part. But as we are discovering, a whole lot of crap went down before. All you need to know now is Danny was calling a woman named Dawn Martinez. At the time, Dawn and her two sisters, Sherry and Kim, were collaborating on a book with our good friend, Tyson Wrench. Here he is to tell us why he felt compelled to write a book on his experience.
It also became very clear that it was a cautionary tale because while it's a crazy story, it's not unique. There are con men and women out there that are just like this. And I really needed to get the word out to as many people as possible on this type of behavior.
Sometime in 2010, Tyson came across Sherry's business card while strolling through a bookstore. On a whim, he emailed her to introduce himself. Tyson told Sherry the story of how Danny, his supposed best friend, stole every last dime from him and was up to no good with Kosal Narula. It wasn't long before they were crafting a story into a book called Until Someone Gets Hurt. This wasn't the sisters' first true crime book, which might surprise you if you met them because they seem like three unassuming, pleasant Midwesterners. Or, as Julie puts it,
They're like characters out of a Fargo movie. I'm from the Midwest, so I know people like this, and it's curious to me that these three women are so drawn to the criminal genre and that they're less scared than I am.
well, everyone on Earth is less scared than you are.
Okay, that's a good point.
I've come to realize in the genre of true crime, you can't make any assumptions about who's into it, who's writing about it, or who's podcasting about it. It can be 15-year-old girls or 50-year-old men and everything in between. And then there's me. Unlike Julie, I'm a true crime junkie. I produce true crime TV shows for a living, and my dream job has always been to work on Dateline. In fact, one of the highlights of my career was in 2015 when I interviewed Keith Morrison, my favorite Dateline journalist, for a show about the LA riots. I fully fangirled out, and I took pictures with him, and it's something I don't do with A-list celebs. My friends always tease me that I never read a book unless someone is meeting a horrific death, and they're right. I'm not sure what the draw is exactly to true crime, but I do know it disturbs the shit out of my dad and fascinates me. For better or for worse, I've gotten pretty good at figuring out what motivates murderers. But Kosal is a mystery to me. At this point, there are only two facts I can hang my hat on. One, he's Nepalese, and two, his namesake is nowhere in the Nepalese royal family tree. So if Kosal doesn't come from royalty, where did he come from? I knew Tyson had done a ton of research for the book, so I gave him a call.
So from what we can tell, Kosal was born in 1981 and lived and grew up in Kathmandu in Nepal. He had graduated from St. Xavier's Jesuit school in Nepal in 1997, and apparently he was 16 at that time. And in his high school, they actually voted him most likely to succeed because he was really sharp.
I'm sharp in some ways, but the history of Nepal isn't one of them. I did some research, and my biggest takeaway is that the country has a long history of struggling economically. That struggle tends to drive many Nepalese to seek employment abroad. Most don't go too far. Neighboring India is only 100 miles away, but Kosal set his sights much further. The United States, 7,500 miles away.
So after Kosal graduated, he wanted to come to America and figured the easiest way to do that was getting a student visa and applying to colleges.
It took a handful of years, but eventually, in 2003, Kosal did just that. He obtained the visa he wanted and became part of the student body at a university called the New College of California. It was located in the Mission District of San Francisco.
So we assume that New College helped him find a place to live and that he also got a job washing dishes in a Thai restaurant.
Never heard of New College of California? Well, I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'd never heard of the place either. Another internet search pulled up a bunch of articles on the place, many of them by a journalist named Matt Smith.
So New College of California pushed really hard to have a reputation as an experimental sort of leftist vanguardist school. It was in a former mortuary, what was almost a cliche because they would sort of use it as part of their promotion to show how quirky they were, that it was
New College's curriculum, by and large, was humanities-based. They offered degrees in a few mainstream programs like psychology and math. But they also offered some less traditional, let's say, quirky degrees, such as spirituality, poetics, and activism. What began you looking into New College?
It was litigation coming by then adult alleged victims of the founder of New College of California, and they'd sued the school because of these sexual misconduct allegations. And that administration were trying to sit on it and hoping it would blow over. And so that for San Francisco was a story.
And what about financially? Did New College struggle?
Well, their income was all educational subsidies. So anytime they were in trouble with their accreditor, that was imperiled. And so they were always moving forward by the seat of their pants.
The accreditor's job is to make sure the school maintains general education standards of quality. If those standards aren't met, or if something sketchy is going on, they can withhold monetary support until the problems are fixed. My research turned up at least 2 other scandals before the allegations against the school's founder came to light. Bottom line, New College was being run horribly, no matter who was at the helm. And then came Kosal Narula. How did you come to learn who Kosal Narula was?
They were amid 2 crises kind of at once. Kosal Narula, who'd gotten in tight with the president, at the school, people called him a prince. He was a man of wealth and taste from his own country. Kosal somehow made the president believe he was on the brink of donating something like $1 million. Supposedly, in exchange, he'd gotten scholarship and unearned class credit, and as a result, Kosal was wrongly able to extend the student visa.
As far as I can tell, this is Kosal's first con on American soil. And by the sounds of it, Kosal's Nepalese royalty story, the same one he'd given to Danny over drinks, was key to its success. Because unlike Danny, the school administrators believed him. Did Kosal use New College? And if so, how?
I guess I never knew whether Kosal was just sort of surfing his good fortune or had a big plot.
Right.
And so the idea that he could have planned it all out seems almost impossible to me. I think he just sort of made a lot of his opportunities.
Right. I get what Matt's saying. It seems improbable that a 20-something-year-old living in Nepal would know that New College was up to its eyeballs in controversy and had money issues. It feels like he probably gleaned all that after he was here and in the good graces of the president. But once he had that info, he capitalized on the school's need for money by lying to the administration about a fat donation in order to get class credits and retain his student visa. Was there anything about the dynamic of New College that sort of set Kosal up for success?
On TV shows and in literature about people being con artists, anybody who's a mark has some real needs. But New College had a history of being a really troubled place, and the president denied the idea that it was a quid pro quo where he was giving Kosal grades for the possibility of money. I just know that that's what the accreditors were looking into, and it's also what people at the school said was happening.
Right. Thanks to my conversation with Matt, I was starting to understand what New College was like and how Kosal was able to exploit its problems. But what I didn't quite understand is how he ended up at the school in the first place. I had a hunch, though. It had something to do with the school's international program. So I started reaching out to former teachers, professors, etc. to see if anyone could help me connect the dots. Most wouldn't talk, and the ones that did would only do it on background. It seems the bad juju surrounding New College and Kosal's time there hadn't faded for anyone. But I did gain some clues. New College allegedly had a sister school in Nepal, and students from the U.S. would go there and vice versa. The international program was started by an administrator at New College named Jerry Decker. I wasn't able to talk to him because, unfortunately, he passed away. But one professor I spoke to told me that there were local coordinators that helped organize everything. And this is me making an assumption here, but it sounds like one of those coordinators perhaps knew Kosal and connected him to Jerry Decker. And voila, student visa. I called Julie to run my loose theory by her. Okay. Again, I don't know that I have the exact pieces of the puzzle fitting, but, Kosal wasn't just a student. He was also continued to be friends with Jerry Decker. Would call him. This person that I spoke to said, oh yeah, his phone would ring and it would just be Kosal on the other end. And they would just chat. I was like, what administration person at your college did you ever call?
No, it's weird.
It's weird, right?
Unusual.
Yeah. A picture was starting to emerge here. Kosal clearly had the most important skill a con man requires. He knew how to target people who could get him what he wanted, and how to convince them to do just that. The professor I spoke to had Kosal as a student, and he told me that the president of New College asked him to pass Kosal even though he hadn't done the work for his class. The professor told the president, yeah, no, I'm good. But in August of 2007, the president we keep mentioning resigned amid accusations he'd altered Kosal Narula's transcripts in exchange for the promise of the $1 million donation. That scandal, combined with an uproar over shoddy record-keeping, led to the accreditor withholding financial aid to the school. When the students didn't get their money, tuitions weren't paid. 3 months later, the school was deep in the red and stopped paying faculty wages. 2 months after that, in January of 2008, the school shuttered for good. Hundreds of students were left with no degree and a mountain of student loan debt. Various faculty filed lawsuits for back pay, and the administration that ran the school into the ground left with their tail between their legs. So, was Kosal Narula responsible for the school's closing? Well, not entirely. But he certainly didn't help matters, and it's also worth noting that out of all the people involved in the sad mess that was New College's collapse, Kosal seems to be the only one who walked away unscathed. As I said earlier, getting anyone from the school to talk was an absolute nightmare. I talked to professors, I talked to students, I even hunted down a janitor. But ultimately, no one would go on the record about this joint or what Kosal's dealings were while there. A few weeks later, however, Lady Luck would shine down on me. I found a guy named Thomas, who was not a student at the school, but he did know Kosal during his time there, and he knew him well.
Hey, Thomas, it's Kim.
Hello?
Hi.
How you doing, Kim?
Today, Thomas owns a moving company and has a side hustle teaching kickboxing. But back in 2004, he was young and looking to enjoy all that San Francisco had to offer.
Okay, so tell me how you met Kosal.
We used to go to a bar called the 26 Mix. Every Tuesday night was broke as fuck night. I think you could get like a beer for $1 or $2 and like a mixed drink for like $2 or $3. It was very cheap. So, that's where we went to pick up girls and stuff. And I was dancing on the dance floor, but this little man in a blazer comes up to me. He's like, hello. He's like, my friend would like to dance with you.
The little man in the blazer was, of course, Kosal Narula. And the friend who wanted to meet Thomas was a Nepalese girl who, for the purpose of this podcast, we'll call Pam.
And next thing we all ended up going out and hanging out that night.
Kosal and Pam were roommates. They knew each other from Kathmandu and were now both students at New College. Thomas became friends with both of them. At this point, Kosal had been in the States for about a year.
Tell me what you know about Kosal's childhood.
He was a nerd. He was very shy and probably maybe knew he was gay at a young age, so he was awkward and didn't dress very well. And somehow his family afforded him to go to a decent school. He seemed quite educated from that. He had a very good vocabulary.
Right.
And he would use that vernacular to his advantage. He would become more British when he wanted to sound more superior. He'd be like, "I will not stand for this." It was kind of like, it was part of his dark side, really. His more diabolical side would produce this British accent.
Eventually, Thomas and Pam's relationship progressed to the boyfriend-girlfriend status. And not too long after, Thomas moved in with her and Kosal.
He was sleeping on the floor on a thin mattress and wearing, not that great of clothes. He had one blazer, and he had this ugly fucking rug on the wall that you find at Ross or Costco. So he would play it off like it was art. And I'm like, that just looks terrible, dude. So he had very little style and panache back then, but then very intelligent. He would catch on really quickly. So he kind of transformed when he came to America. The whole new college thing kind of opened up his eyes to all the power he could behold, and he kind of just took off like a rocket.
Took off like a rocket is an understatement. Kosal would go on to con unsuspecting victims out of millions of dollars. Of course, Thomas couldn't have known about any of that when he and Kosal were roommates. And yet...
I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, which is kind of a mob town. I'm half Italian, I'm kind of a big, scary-looking guy. I remember one time he came home, and he's like, "Hey, dude. He's like, can you whack somebody for me?"
It was while living with Thomas that the first signs of just who Kosal Narula really was came to light. That's after the break. In true crime, you often hear the word escalation. Burglary turns to robbery. Robbery escalates to armed robbery. But Kosal, he just went from claiming to be a Nepalese prince and promising New College $1 million to allegedly plotting a murder. One day, seemingly out of the blue, Kosal asked his roommate Thomas for a very particular kind of favor.
And he's like, can you whack somebody for me? And I'm like, what do you mean? He asked me seriously. He's like, hey, I need you to kill somebody for me.
So what'd you say to him?
Well, I'm like, no, man. I'm like, no, I can't do that.
Did he tell you who he wanted you to kill, or?
I think he was some kind of banker, right? He had all these burner phones. So he's over there in that room, making all these calls, and a lot of them were calls overseas, and he was always on his laptop. I could tell he was trying to work some kind of angle on something with banking or some financial maneuver. But
did he tell you why he wanted that one banker whacked?
If the guy was killed, it would free up $30,000 or something. It wasn't an astronomical figure.
True, 30 grand wouldn't buy Kosal a private island, but it would have certainly gotten him from the thin mattress on the floor to a proper bed, among other things. The more I spoke to Thomas, the more I felt as though Kosal's financial situation was pretty dire. It's also a hard fact that the cost of living in San Francisco is crazy. It's one of the highest in the country. I can't imagine the wages from his supposed dishwashing gig or cutting it.
Because he was like Rob Peter to pay Paul. He was always late for rent. Then one time we gave him money to pay the PG&E bill. Our electricity got turned off. We literally got blacked out. It was like, look, kid, I'm going to kick your ass, if you don't give us the money back or turn these, fucking lights on. He got scared and moved out.
Thomas had no clue where Kosal went, and frankly, he didn't care. Then, months later, Kosal reappeared at Pam and Thomas's place, and things had changed dramatically. Kosal Narula was inexplicably flush with cash.
Oh, yeah, I had a nickname for him, Johnny White Tops, because he came back with, these brand new, $500 white leather shoes. He had dyed his hair blonde, and he had all this fucking money. And he started taking us out to like nice places, nice restaurants, and then sure enough, he had a limo driver with him. And he used to keep like bags of cash in the trunk. So it was really wild.
Did all this newfound cash have anything to do with that banker guy that Kosal wanted dead? I don't know, but Thomas had a theory.
And I'm just thinking like, okay, well, maybe he's like a gay escort, just kind of milking sugar daddies. You know what I mean?
Thomas mentioned that Kosal was hitting up the best restaurants, bars, and clubs that San Francisco had to offer, which, incidentally, made a story that Danny told on the phone while in prison make a whole lot more sense.
I was out at a nightclub having a good time. All of a sudden, I turned around to order a round of shots, and the bartender starts popping bottles of champagne. So I'm screaming at the bartender, whoa, stop, because that's not what I ordered. He says, no, it's courtesy of the gentleman at the end of the bar. I looked, and the guy looks vaguely familiar, but I can't quite place it. And finally it clicked.
It took 3 years and one fateful night at a club to reunite Kosal and Danny for good, and so much bad.
I went, oh my God, is that crazy kid I met 3 years ago who told me he was some kind of prince of India or something? So, of course, I go over there to thank him, and now he's dressed wearing an Armani Collezione blazer and, Louis Vuitton shoes and an expensive watch, and, and he's just smiling and telling me, oh, you didn't believe that I was really the prince of Nepal. So outside, he's got 3 chauffeured town cars with a bunch of Russian guys with earpieces like they're Secret Service or something. He's staying at the presidential suite at the Four Seasons at $5,000 a night. And so, and he basically invites me over to the presidential suite the next day.
3 years earlier, Danny was skeptical of Kosal's royal family story, but this time, he took the bait.
Tells me the same ridiculous story that, Tom White basically stole $100 million of the royal family's money, and it's his goal to try to get it back.
This is the same multimillionaire Thomas White you heard about in the last episode with Julie. Danny accused Thomas of molesting him, sued him for $7 million, and won. Kosal knew all about Danny's victory, and now he wanted his help.
And do I know where Thomas White keeps his money? Because I sued him, so we have financial discovery. Well, you're about a year late because we settled and we gave all that information back at the close of litigation, so I couldn't tell you. And so he, was kind of disappointed and said, okay, well, he had other plans.
Other plans? What kind of other plans? And what was this story about Thomas White being a thief? The man was a self-made millionaire, for God's sake. Why would he be stealing money from the Nepalese royal family?
And, I like to think of myself as an intelligent person. And so have all of his marks. I mean, he cons really intelligent, wealthy individuals, and these stories may sound so ridiculous on the surface, but when you're in the middle of it, and you've got someone who is walking through the lobby of the Four Seasons, and all the staff is bowing down to him, saying, good afternoon, Your Majesty. You give him the benefit of the doubt. Who does these things?
Right.
And
well, now we did hear a story where he was going to commandeer a submarine.
I guess this is Kosal's definition of other plans.
Yes, and one of the nights he invited David Replogle over, who was my civil attorney, to handle the Thomas White matter, and told him the same spiel, and said that he wanted to break Tom White out of the prison in Mexico and that wire the money back.
Thomas White, as you may recall, was sitting in a Mexican prison on charges relating to the abuse of minors.
He tells us that he's got Gurkhas, who are Nepalese special forces, who are going to go in and break Tom out of prison, which, to be honest, would not be so far-fetched because I've been there, and there's like a guard watching a little tiny black and white television with rabbit ears and his, AK-47s, leaning up against the wall in the corner.
Right.
So he tells me, the genius of this is that, the Gurkhas are going to break him out, and they're going to take off, and 3 planes are in different directions, so the Mexicans won't know which one he's on. And I was like, well, okay, what if they were to just tell all 3 planes to land? But that's the genius of it, Johnny. He won't steal any of them. I'm like, okay, I'll bite. Where's he going to be? He goes, he's going to be on a dinghy going out into the middle of the Pacific Ocean where he's going to rendezvous with the USS Tucson nuclear attack submarine.
Yep, you heard that right. Kosal was going to use a nuclear submarine as a getaway car.
Because while he was in Hawaii that summer, he bribed his Navy admiral, millions of dollars to smuggle Tom out of Mexico.
Okay, here's one super important thing to note. The mention of Kosal being in Hawaii, this is massive and will come into play in a major friggin' way. But not just yet. Here's Danny again.
I'm thinking, wow, this guy's really serious. He's obviously got the means. I mean, he's got throwing money around like some kind of Maharaja, so... Then Thanksgiving rolled around, and I had to go up to spend time with my family, and he kind of indicated he didn't have anywhere to go, and there's a little sob story about how his whole family had been killed, and I said, well, do you want to tag along with me? And that was Thanksgiving Day, 2006.
Okay.
And he then stayed with my parents and I, and then he just kind of disappeared.
With such big plans for Thomas White, why on earth did Kosal ghost? Knowing just how financially motivated he was, I began to wonder if Danny was a target. Kosal knew about Danny's multi-million-dollar settlement from Thomas White, and if that's what he was after, did he realize that Danny had spent most of it and cut his losses? For insight, I reached out to the only person I knew who spent significant time with both Danny and Kosal.
Hi, Kim.
Danny's cousin Dennis, who you met in the last episode. Hey Dennis, how's it going?
Yeah, I was up all night last night howling at the moon, so...
Oh boy.
It's like what I do.
Gotcha. I want to start with, why do you feel that Kosal sought Danny out?
Well, because he saw him in People magazine and he was king shit in the Castro.
Danny was apparently one of the it guys in the Castro at the time. He was young, hot, and had Thomas White's money to spend. Is there any part of you that feels that because of this Thomas White settlement for the millions of dollars that he read about in People, that maybe Kosal looked at Danny as an opportunity, like money-wise?
No, not at all. I would say he looked more at him like an ally. Danny had already spent pretty much all the money before Kosal got into it. Why do you think Danny was even dealing with him in the first place?
Well, that's what I want to know. Like that, and I guess that's
the ally thing. You take it exactly how I said it. Okay, it sounds like you're reaching for things for me to say, and I don't like that.
Julie and I have had a lot of conversations with Dennis up to this point, and he's always been an open book and even an oversharer. So why the attitude? No, I was just trying. I'm not reaching for anything. I just wanted clarification. That's all.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they partnered up to be partners in crime. I mean, what else would it be?
How would you describe Kosal and Danny's relationship?
Like when you say relationship, yeah, that's like boyfriend, girlfriend. They were not that. I never saw anything like that. And, maybe in the beginning they might have messed around or made out or kissed or whatever. But Danny said he swore up and down he never slept with him. And I believed him. Yeah. So to get that out of there right now so people know Danny and Kosal did not do anything. Okay. So, yeah.
Would you describe them as friends? Did they have fun together? Did they like to hit the bars together? Or
what picture are you trying to paint? Like, what are you expecting?
Honestly, I'm not trying anything. You were one of the few people that we've been able to speak to that spent time with two of them together. So I was just trying to, glean from you, a little bit about like what they were like together. That's all. That's really it.
Yeah. So basically they just were like standard friends. They like to go out and spend money and, bone dudes and, talk shit about wanting to rule the world. They had that in common. They constantly were always talking about that.
Okay, Dennis. Thank you. That was really all I needed. That was a total lie. I needed and wanted more. But for whatever reason, Dennis was over me. I was able to corroborate one piece of information Dennis gave me by reaching out to Tyson.
No, there was never any mention of them hooking up at all.
So there we go. Kosal and Danny were friends, not lovers, period. And, so I don't leave you hanging, Kosal never attempted to break Thomas White out of prison with a nuclear submarine. But the question remained, where'd he get all that money he'd been flaunting around San Francisco? Something his old roommate Thomas Avana said was a possible clue.
We were home one day, and I could hear this girl sobbing on the phone, like this Japanese girl. She kind of unloaded this money on him, and he just took it and ran away with it.
What did you think?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have no idea. I just remember the night she called.
Thomas didn't have a lot of details, but this phone call piqued my interest. When Julie and I started working on this story, our producer, Dominique, gave us this big contact grid. It was kind of organized by headers like New College, Thomas White, and then under each header were some scattered names and bits and pieces of contact info. Whenever Julie and I were stuck trying to figure out a piece of this insane puzzle, this massive spreadsheet of names and dates and cons is what we would come back to. Okay, go to line number 86.
86. Okay.
Column C.
Yes.
There were over 200 rows on the grid, but right around the middle was a story entitled Japanese Tourist, and a possible lead who was based in Hawaii. It says, attorney for Japanese victim who believed Kosal Narula possessed supernatural powers.
This is an attorney who believes this?
That's what it says here. Unless Dom was high when she wrote this. Time and time again, we'd found ourselves faced with people, not just victims, but lawyers and private investigators who were terrified of Kosal. Like, genuinely terrified. Julie and I were constantly asking ourselves, what is it about this guy? And then, just as I was formulating my plan to chase down the Japanese tourist attorney, we got new tape from Dawn and her sisters.
Hi, Dawn. How are you?
After months of trying to get into this guy's head, here I was, finally hearing the voice of Kosal Narula.
See, they just thought that I was going to go off to prison and die and blah, 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 blah. Well, things don't exactly work like that.
No. At least in the case of Kosal Narula and Danny Garcia, they most certainly do not. Next week, why Kosal's time in Hawaii left some people convinced he was more devil than prince. American Hustlers is a production of Frequency Machine, produced in association with True Crime News. This episode was written and hosted by me, Kim Kantner, and produced by me, Julie Golden, and Avi Glajansky. Editing and sound design by Amy Durant. Mixing and mastering by Julian Kwasniewski. Executive produced by Stacy Book, Dominique Ferrari, and Avi Glajansky. Featuring the voices of Vivek Bola as Kosal Narula, William Updike as Danny Garcia, and David Song as Miguel Bustamante. Music courtesy of Jingle Punks. Archival recordings of Kosal Narula and Danny Garcia provided by Sherry Loiter, Don Martinez, and Kim Hansen. Archival recordings of Craig McCarthy and the Palm Springs Police and Danny Garcia's recordings of Judge Downing and the Court Clerk via DesertSun.com. The book, Until Someone Gets Hurt, by Sherry Loiter and Tyson Wrench, with research assistance by Don Martinez and Kim Hansen, was an invaluable resource for us as we made American Hustlers. You can find a link to it in our show notes. Special thanks to Kathy Lombard, Matt Smith, Andy Wells, Tyson Wrench, Sherry Loiter, Don Martinez, Kim Hansen, Bob Moeller, and Christine Anotu at Warner Brothers. If you like this episode and want to hear more stories like this, please leave us a review and tell everyone. It really helps other people discover the show. For more information on this and all of our series, check out frequencymachine.com.